Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Harbinger, staring at the massive planet that filled the main screen. The world looked like hell itself. Red and orange clouds swirled around it, and bright flashes showed volcanic eruptions happening across its surface. The air readings showed temperatures hot enough to melt metal. The gravity was 3 times stronger than Earth's. "Captain, I'm picking up those signals again," said Ryan Burke from his communication station. The young man had been tracking mysterious radio waves for months. They're definitely coming from that planet. Amy Chin looked up from her pilot controls. Her face showed worry. "Sir, nothing should be able to live down there. The conditions would kill any known life form in minutes." Jake had been thinking the same thing. He was a career military man who had seen strange things in space. But this was different. Something was sending organized signals from a world that should be completely dead. "Lisa, what do our scanners show?" Jake asked. Engineer Lisa Thompson worked at her station, running deep scans of the planet's surface. "Sir, you're not going to believe this. I'm reading massive structures down there. Cities. And they're not empty ruins. There's movement, energy signatures, and what looks like industrial activity." The bridge fell silent. Carlos Rodriguez, their weapons specialist, leaned forward in his chair. "Captain, if something can live on that world, it's probably tougher than anything we've ever seen." Jake knew Carlos was right. Earth was considered a dangerous planet by most alien species they had met. High gravity, violent weather, and deadly creatures made Earth a place most aliens avoided. But this planet made Earth look like a vacation spot. "Take us into a high orbit," Jake ordered Amy. "Keep us hidden behind that moon. I want to study this place before we do anything else." The Harbinger was built for exploration, but it carried heavy weapons. Jake had learned long ago that space was full of hostile species. Most alien races they had encountered either ignored humans or tried to conquer them. Very few wanted to be friends. For 3 days, the crew watched and recorded everything they could see. What they discovered made them all nervous. The beings living on the planet were huge. Even from orbit, they could see creatures moving that had to be at least 12 feet tall. They moved in organized groups and operated machines. "I've been analyzing their city layouts," Lisa reported during a crew meeting. "These aren't just survival shelters. They're military fortresses. Every building is designed to withstand attacks." Ryan had been studying their radio signals. "Captain, I've translated some of their communications. They call themselves the Worthaki, and from what I can understand, they're not peaceful. They talk about conquest battles and something they call soft flesh slaves." Jake felt his blood run cold. "Show me what you found." Ryan put the translated messages on the main screen. The words painted a clear picture. The Worthaki had conquered 17 star systems. They had enslaved or killed every other species they found. They considered themselves the ultimate warriors. They called other life forms weak and unworthy. "Sir," Amy said quietly, "maybe we should leave. Report back to Earth and let the military handle this." Jake understood her fear, but he knew they couldn't just run away. If the Worthaki found Earth, humanity would face a war they couldn't win. These creatures were natural-born killers who had survived on a world that would destroy most life. They had weapons and ships designed for conquest. "Carlos, what do you think of their military setup?" Jake asked. The weapons expert had been studying their orbital defenses and ship movements. "Captain, they're incredibly strong, but they rely on brute force. Their tactics are straightforward, overwhelming power and direct attacks. They don't seem to use much strategy beyond. Hit it harder than it hits you." Jake began to form an idea. It was crazy and dangerous, but it might be their only chance. Humans had one advantage that the Worthaki might not expect. Throughout human history, smaller and weaker forces had defeated larger ones through intelligence, tactics, and refusing to give up. "Ryan, can you send a message to their homeworld?" Jake asked. "Yes, sir, but why would we want to dash?" "Because we're going to do something no other species has done." Jake said, "We're going to challenge them." The crew stared at him like he had lost his mind. Amy was the first to speak. "Captain, one of those things could probably tear our ship apart with its bare hands. We can't fight them." Jake smiled grimly. "We're not going to fight their army, Amy. We're going to challenge their best warrior to single combat, just me against one of them. Carlos shook his head. Sir, that's suicide. Even in our best combat suit, you wouldn't last 5 minutes against one of those monsters. Maybe, Jake said, but I've been thinking about something. These Warthaki respect strength and combat. If I challenge them honorably, they might accept. And if I can find a way to win, we might be able to avoid a war that would destroy both our species. Lisa looked worried. Captain, what makes you think you could possibly win? Jake had been studying military history his entire career. He knew about David and Goliath, about how Cortez conquered the Aztecs, about how small groups of soldiers had defeated much larger armies. Lisa, humans didn't become the dominant species on Earth by being the strongest. We became dominant by being the smartest. We learned to use tools, tactics, and our environment as weapons. Ryan was working on his communications equipment. Sir, I can send a message, but are you sure about this? Jake looked around at his crew. They were good people who trusted him. He was about to risk not just his life, but possibly their lives and the future humanity. But doing nothing would definitely lead to disaster when the Warthaki eventually found Earth. Send a message, Ryan. Tell them that Captain Jake Morrison of the Human Vessel Harbinger challenges their strongest warrior to single combat. Winner takes all. As Ryan sent the message into space, Jake wondered if he had just signed humanity's death warrant or found a way to save them all. The response came faster than Jake expected. Within 6 hours, the Warthaki had sent back a message that made his blood freeze. The translation appeared on the main screen as Ryan worked to decode their language. Soft flesh human, your challenge amuses us. No weak species has ever dared to face the Warthaki warrior in honorable combat. War Chief Zaktor accepts your challenge. He has killed champions from 43 different species. You will die screaming, but you will die with honor. Choose your combat ground. Amy stared at the message in horror. Captain, 43 species. This Zaktor has literally made a career out of killing alien champions. Jake felt his stomach drop, but he couldn't show fear to his crew. Ryan, sent a reply. Tell them we'll fight on a neutral asteroid. Equal conditions for both fighters. Sir, Lisa said from her engineering station, I've been analyzing the data we collected about Warthaki physiology. They're not just big and strong. Their natural armor plating can stop most energy weapons. Their bone density is 5 times greater than human bone. And their muscle fibers are designed for their high-gravity world. Carlos had been studying the combat data they had gathered. Captain, I've watched recordings of Warthaki fights. They don't just defeat enemies, they completely destroy them. This war chief Zaktor fights with weapons that are basically living metal. They respond to his nervous system and can change shape during combat. Jake knew his crew was trying to talk him out of this insane plan. He couldn't blame them. Any rational person would see this as suicide. But Jake had spent years studying military history, and he knew that sometimes impossible was the only option. I need all of you to help me prepare, Jake said. Lisa, I want you to modify my combat suit. Not for strength. We can't match their power. Modify it for speed and mobility. What do you have in mind, sir? Lisa asked. I'm going to fight smarter, not harder. Carlos, I need you to design weapons that can exploit any weaknesses in Warthaki armor. And Ryan, I need you to study everything we know about their fighting style. Amy looked frustrated. Captain, even if you somehow win this fight, what then? Do you really think they'll just leave us alone? Jake had been thinking about that too. Amy, from what we've learned, the Warthaki respect strength above everything else. If I could defeat their champion, it might buy us time. Maybe even respect. The crew worked for 2 days straight preparing for the combat. Lisa redesigned Jake's suit to be lighter and faster. She added jump jets for quick movement and modified the life support to work in harsh conditions. Carlos created specialized weapons, shaped charges that could be used to modify the battlefield, and a plasma sword designed to cut through Warthaki armor at weak points. Ryan studied every piece of Warthaki combat data they had collected. Captain, they fight like berserkers. All aggression and overwhelming force. They expect their enemies to either run away or try to match their strength. That's exactly what I'm counting on, Jake said. He had been studying human military tactics from throughout history, guerrilla warfare, asymmetric tactics, and using the enemy's strength against them. Ryan, have you found anything about their culture that might help? Actually, yes. The Vorthaki have very strict honor codes about combat. Once they accept a challenge, they have to fight fairly. No tricks, no outside help. It's one warrior against another. Jake smiled for the first time in days. That might be the only advantage we have. The day of combat arrived. The Harbinger followed Vorthaki coordinates to a barren asteroid in an empty system. The asteroid was perfect, low gravity, thin atmosphere, and rocky terrain that could provide cover or be modified during the fight. Jake suited up in his modified armor while his crew made final preparations. Amy came to see him before he left the ship. "Sir, I still think this is crazy," she said. "But if anyone can find a way to win an impossible fight, it's you. Amy, if something goes wrong, get the crew back to Earth. Tell them what we learned about the Vorthaki. Humanity needs to be prepared." Jake took the shuttle to the asteroid surface. As he landed, he saw the Vorthaki ship, a massive, dark vessel that looked like it was designed for war. A transport launched from their ship and landed nearby. The creature that emerged made Jake's heart stop. War Chief Zakthor was enormous, even for Vorthaki. He stood nearly 13 feet tall, covered in natural armor that looked like black metal. Scars covered his body, trophies from dozens of battles. In his forearms, he carried weapons that seemed alive. They shifted and flowed like liquid metal. Zakthor's voice boomed across the asteroid as he spoke in his own language. Ryan's translation came through Jake's helmet radio. "Human, I am impressed that you came. Most species send champions who try to flee when they see me. You stand ready to fight. This brings you honor before your death." Jake activated his suit speakers. "War Chief Zakthor, I'm honored to face a warrior of your reputation. May we both fight with courage." The Vorthaki warrior seemed pleased by Jake's respectful response. "You show proper respect, small human. I will make your death quick." The two fighters took positions on opposite sides of a flat area of the asteroid. Jake could see the Vorthaki and human ships watching from orbit. This fight would determine the fate of first contact between their species. Jake checked his weapons and equipment one final time. His suit felt good, light and responsive. His plasma sword hummed with energy. The shape charges were ready to use. Everything depended on the next few hours. Zakthor raised his weapons and let out a battle cry that echoed across the asteroid. Jake drew his sword and prepared to face the impossible. The fight began the moment Zakthor finished his war cry. The massive Vorthaki warrior charged across the asteroid's surface with surprising speed for something so large. His forearms swung living metal weapons that stretched and changed shape as they moved. Jake had expected this. He didn't try to block or meet the charge head-on. Instead, he activated his jump jets and launched himself sideways, using the low gravity to perform a movement impossible on most worlds. Zakthor's weapons crashed into the rocky ground where Jake had been standing, creating deep craters. The Vorthaki warrior turned quickly and swung again. Jake was already moving, staying mobile and keeping his distance. His modified suit let him bounce and leap around the battlefield while the heavier Vorthaki had to deal with momentum and changing direction. "You run like prey," Zakthor bellowed. "Face me and die with honor." Jake didn't respond. He was studying his opponent, looking for patterns and weaknesses. The Vorthaki fought exactly like Ryan had predicted, all aggression and overwhelming force. Zakthor expected Jake to either flee in terror or try to match his strength. He wasn't prepared for someone who fought differently. Jake pulled out his first shaped charge and threw it at a rocky outcropping near Zakthor. The explosion sent chunks of stone flying and created a cloud of dust. The Vorthaki warrior charged through it, weapons ready. But Jake had already moved to a different position. "Coward!" Zakthor roared. "Fight like a warrior." But Jake was fighting like a warrior, a human warrior. He used the terrain, created obstacles, and stayed mobile. When Zakthor charged, Jake would leap over him or roll under his attacks. When the Vorthaki swung his weapons, Jake would be somewhere else. The battle continued for an hour. Zakthor was getting frustrated and angry. His attacks became wilder and less controlled. Jake, meanwhile, was learning. He studied how the living metal weapons moved, where Zakthor's armor was thickest, and how the warrior balanced his massive frame. Jake placed another shaped charge, this time creating a pit that Zakthor had to jump over. While the Warthaki was in the air, Jake struck for the first time. His plasma sword slashed across the warrior's back leg, finding a gap between armor plates. The blade cut deep, and Zakthor roared in pain and surprise. "First blood to the human," Jake said calmly. Zakthor landed heavily and spun around. For the first time, there was something other than confidence in his eyes. "Impossible. Your weak weapons cannot harm Warthaki armor." "Your armor is strong," Jake agreed, "but it has joints, places where it has to bend and flex. That's where it's vulnerable." The Warthaki warrior studied Jake with new respect and wariness. "You fight strangely, human, but tricks will not save you." Zakthor changed his tactics. Instead of wild charges, he began advancing slowly and carefully. His weapons moved in defensive patterns, protecting his weak spots. He was learning, too. Jake realized the easy phase of the fight was over. Now, he had to take real risks. He activated his jump jets and launched himself directly at Zakthor. The Warthaki swung to intercept him, but Jake twisted in midair and landed on the warrior's back. Jake's plasma sword struck at the joint where Zakthor's neck met his shoulder armor. The blade bit deep, but Zakthor grabbed Jake with one of his rear arms and hurled him away. Jake hit the ground hard and rolled to absorb impact. Both fighters were bleeding now. Jake's suit showed damage from the throw, and Zakthor had 2 serious wounds. The Warthaki warrior was breathing heavily. Even with his incredible strength, fighting in low gravity while wearing heavy armor was exhausting. "You fight with honor, human," Zakthor said, "but this ends now." The Warthaki warrior's weapon began to glow with internal energy. Jake realized that Zakthor was preparing some kind of final attack. The living metal weapons were charging up with power. Jake made a desperate decision. He threw his remaining shaped charges not at Zakthor, but at the asteroid surface around the warrior's feet. The explosions created a deep crater. Zakthor, off balance from the sudden change in terrain, stumbled forward. Jake leaped high into the air, using his jump jets to gain maximum height. As Zakthor tried to regain his balance in the crater, Jake came down from above with his plasma sword pointed downward like a spear. The Warthaki warrior saw him coming and raised his weapons to block. The living metal formed a protective dome above Zakthor's head. But Jake had expected this. At the last second, he twisted his body and activated his side jets, changing his angle of attack. Instead of striking the dome of weapons, Jake's sword slipped past the defense and drove deep into the joint where Zakthor's primary arm met his torso. The plasma blade severed critical nerves and blood vessels. The Warthaki's weapons immediately went dead as he lost control of his upper arms. Zakthor fell to his knees in the crater. Jake landed nearby, his sword still glowing with plasma energy. Both fighters were exhausted and wounded, but Jake was still standing while the Warthaki champion was down. "Finish it, human," Zakthor said with respect. "You have earned victory through skill and courage. Take your trophy." Jake walked closer, but didn't raise his sword. "War Chief Zakthor, you fought with great honor. I don't need a trophy. I need your word that this combat settles a matter between our species." Zakthor looked confused. "You would let me live? After defeating me in honorable combat? Where I come from, a worthy enemy can become a valuable ally," Jake said. He deactivated his sword and extended his hand to help the fallen warrior stand. Zakthor stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Then he reached out with his remaining functional arm and grasped Jake's hand. "Human, you have shown me something new this day. Perhaps there's more to your species than we understood." As Jake helped the massive warrior climb out of the crater, he could see both ships in orbit watching the unprecedented scene. A human had defeated a Warthaki champion, and instead of claiming victory through death, had chosen mercy and respect. Jake knew this was only the beginning. The real test would be how both species reacted to what had just happened on this barren asteroid. The Warthaki homeworld was in chaos. For the first time in their recorded history, One of their champions had been defeated by what they considered an inferior species. Jake's victory over War Chief Zakthor sent shockwaves through their entire civilization. Jake returned to Harbinger to find his crew both relieved and worried. Amy helped him out of his damaged combat suit, while Lisa ran medical scans to check his injuries. "Captain, that was incredible," Ryan said. "But look at this." He put the Vorthaki communications they were intercepting on the main screen. Their leadership is split. Some want to honor their combat traditions, but others are calling for full-scale war. Jake winced as Lisa treated a deep cut on his shoulder. What are they saying exactly? There's a war chief named Mordak who's arguing that you won fairly and that they should respect the outcome. But High Commander Vextar is claiming the combat was invalid because humans use trickery instead of true strength. Carlos looked up from his weapons console. "Sir, I'm reading massive fleet movements from their homeworld. It looks like they're preparing for war." Jake had feared this might happen. Defeating one warrior was impressive, but it wouldn't stop an entire species from attacking if they felt their pride was wounded. He needed a new strategy. "Ryan, can you establish communication with both factions? I want to talk to both Mordak and Vextar." Within hours, Jake found himself in a three-way conversation that would determine the fate of both species. The Vorthaki appeared on the main screen. Mordak was smaller than Zakthor, but carried himself with quiet dignity. Vextar was enormous even by Vorthaki standards, his armor decorated with trophies from conquered worlds. "Human Morrison," Mordak spoke first, "you have earned respect through combat. War Chief Zakthor confirms that you fought with honor and skill. By our ancient laws, your victory must be acknowledged." Vextar's voice boomed with anger. "Laws created when we face worthy opponents. This human used deception and cowardice. True warriors do not hide and strike from shadows like scavengers." Jake remained calm. "High Commander Vextar, I use the tactics that work best for my species, just as your warriors use the strength that works best for yours. Every species fights according to their nature. Your nature is weakness." Vextar snarled. "One victory proves nothing. Any of our warriors could defeat you if they knew your cowardly methods." Jake saw an opportunity. "Then prove it. I challenge your entire species to demonstrate their superiority." Both Vorthaki leaders fell silent. Amy turned to stare at Jake in horror. His crew was starting to think their captain had completely lost his mind. "What do you mean, human?" Mordak asked carefully. Jake had been thinking about this since his fight with Zakthor. "I propose a series of trials. Not just combat, but tests of survival, adaptability, and warrior skill. Human teams against Vorthaki teams on different worlds. If you win, humanity submits to Vorthaki rule. If we win, you leave human space alone." Vextar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You would gamble your entire species on such trials." "Would you?" Jake asked simply. The question hung in the air. The Vorthaki prided themselves on being ultimate warriors and survivors. Refusing such a challenge would suggest they had doubts about their superiority. What worlds would host these trials? Mordak asked. Jake had prepared for this question. 5 worlds of different types. You choose 2, we choose 2, and we mutually agree on the 5th. Each world tests different survival skills. Amy activated a private comm channel. "Captain, are you insane? We can't gamble humanity's future on some kind of galactic game show." Jake responded privately. "Amy, if we don't do this, they'll attack anyway. At least this gives us a chance to prove ourselves on equal terms." Vextar was considering the proposal. How many beings in each trial? Small teams, 5 from each species per world. Best fighters and survivors each side can provide. And if we refuse this challenge, Mordak asked, then we fight a war that will destroy both our peoples. Jake said honestly, your species is stronger individually, but humans don't give up easily. The cost in lives would be terrible for everyone. The 2 Vorthaki leaders spoke in their own language for several minutes. Finally, Vextar turned back to the screen. Human Morrison, your proposal has merit. If your species is foolish enough to risk everything on these trials, we accept. But we choose the combat rules for each world. Agreed, Jake said, as long as the rules are the same for both teams on each world. Mordak leaned forward. Human, you realize that we have conquered 17 star systems. We have survived challenges that destroyed entire civilizations. What makes you think your people can match us? Jake smiled grimly. War Chief Mordak, my species survived the ultimate test before we ever left our homeworld. Earth taught us to adapt, to cooperate, and to never give up. Those lessons have served us well. Your Earth is said to be a dangerous world, Vextar admitted, but it cannot compare to hell worlds where we will test your people. We'll see, Jake said, after the communication ended. Jake's crew gathered around him with expressions of concern and disbelief. Captain, Lisa said, do you have any idea what you just committed us to? We're going to be facing the best warriors from a species that has conquered dozens of worlds. Jake nodded. Lisa, I know exactly what we're facing, and I know that humanity has something they don't expect. What's that? Carlos asked. We're not just individual warriors. We're a team. We've survived everything Earth could throw at us by working together. The Worthaki are strong individually, but they don't understand cooperation the way humans do. Amy looked skeptical. Sir, cooperation is great, but can it overcome beings who can literally tear apart steel with their bare hands? Jake looked at his crew. These people had followed him into impossible danger and trusted his crazy plans. Amy, throughout human history, we've faced opponents who were bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than us. Saber-toothed tigers, mammoths, hostile environments, and enemy armies. We didn't survive by being the strongest. We survived by being the smartest, the most adaptable, and by never giving up. Ryan was already working on his communications equipment. Captain, I'm receiving the coordinates of the first trial world. It's a frozen methane planet with surface temperatures that would instantly freeze most life forms. Jake smiled. Ryan, humans learned to survive in the Arctic thousands of years ago. This should be interesting. Skies. Jake had assembled his team carefully. Tony Baker, a former Marine who had survived Arctic warfare. Kelly Wright, a survival expert who could find food and shelter anywhere. Steve Collins, a tactical genius who could turn any situation into an advantage. And Amy Chun, whose pilot skills and quick thinking had saved them many times. The Worthaki team was exactly what Jake expected. 5 massive warriors chosen for individual strength and fighting ability. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons designed to smash through any obstacle. They looked confident as they prepared for the trials. The rules are simple, announced Mordak, who was overseeing the trials. Both teams will be dropped on opposite sides of the continent. You must survive for 7 days and reach the extraction point in the center. The first team to arrive wins. Jake's team wore modified environmental suits designed for extreme cold. They carried basic survival gear and tools that could be adapted for multiple uses. The Worthaki team had individual survival pods and weapons powerful enough to blast through ice walls. The moment they landed, Jake's team did something the Worthaki didn't expect. Instead of heading directly toward the extraction point, they took time to study their environment and worked together to build proper shelter. Captain, the Worthaki team is already moving, Amy reported, checking their tracking equipment. They're making good time across the ice. Let them, Jake said calmly. Kelly, what do you see? Kelly Wright had been studying the frozen landscape around them. This planet has life. Small creatures that survive in the methane ice. That means food and materials we can use. Also, there are thermal vents that provide heat sources. Tony Baker was setting up a defensive perimeter. Sir, this isn't just about reaching the extraction point first, is it? We're being hunted. Jake nodded. The Worthaki don't just want to win. They want to prove their superiority by eliminating the competition. For the first 3 days, both teams moved across the frozen landscape. The Worthaki made rapid progress, using brute force to smash through obstacles. Jake's team moved more slowly but more intelligently, following thermal currents and safe routes. On the 4th day, everything changed. A massive ice storm hit the continent, bringing temperatures down even further and creating blizzard conditions that made travel nearly impossible. The Worthaki team, caught in the open, tried to power through the storm. Their individual survival pods provided some protection, but they were fighting the planet itself with brute force. Jake's team had seen the storm coming and prepared. They had built a shelter using Kelly's knowledge of survival techniques and were waiting out the worst weather. "Captain," Steve Collins said while monitoring their communications, "I'm picking up Vorthaki distress signals. Sounds like they're in serious trouble." Jake made a decision that surprised his team. "Tony, Kelly with me. Amy and Steve maintain our shelter. We're going to help them." Amy stared at him. "Sir, they're our opponents. If they don't make it, we win by default." "We win by being better," Jake said, "not by letting worthy opponents die." Jake's rescue team found the Vorthaki warriors trapped in a crevasse, their equipment failing in the extreme cold. 2 of them were unconscious from hypothermia, and the others were too weak to continue. "Human Morrison," gasped the Vorthaki team leader, a warrior named Grakto, "why do you help us? We are enemies in this trial." Jake was already working with Tony and Kelly to stabilize the injured Vorthaki. "Grakto, you're not our enemies. You're our competition. There's a difference." Kelly had improvised heating elements from salvage equipment and was treating the hypothermic warriors. "Captain, we can save them, but they won't be able to continue the trial." Jake helped carry the injured Vorthaki back to their shelter. His team worked together to save lives that should have been left to die according to pure strategic thinking. When the storm passed, Jake's team continued toward the extraction point. They arrived first, but instead of celebrating victory, they waited. 6 hours later, Grakto and the 2 surviving members of his team reached the extraction point. They were exhausted and defeated, but alive. "Human Morrison," Grakto said formally, "you have won this trial. But more than that, you have shown us something we did not expect." The trials continued across 4 more worlds. On a jungle planet with carnivorous plants, Kelly Wright turned the deadly vegetation into medicine and shelter materials. On a high-radiation desert world, Steve Collins developed tactics that use the underground cave systems to provide both protection and strategic advantage. The Waterworld trial almost ended in disaster when massive sea creatures attacked both teams. Tony Baker's military training helped coordinate a joint defense that saved everyone, while Amy's quick thinking found an underwater route to safety. The final trial took place on a volcanic world similar to the Vorthaki homeworld. This was supposed to be their overwhelming advantage, a place where their natural adaptations would guarantee victory. Jake faced the new Vorthaki champion, War Chief Torvak, in individual combat, while their teams competed in survival challenges around them. But something unexpected happened during their fight. The volcano they were fighting on began to erupt. Lava flows threatened to cut off all escape routes. Torvak, focused on the combat, didn't notice the danger until it was almost too late. Jake could have let his opponent die and claimed victory. Instead, he grabbed Torvak and used his suit's jump jets to carry them both to safety as lava flowed through where they had been fighting. "Why?" Torvak asked as they reached safe ground. "You had won. My death would have ended this trial in your favor." Jake helped the injured Vorthaki warrior stand. Because winning isn't about killing your opponents. It's about proving you're better. And being better means making choices that show who you really are. When all the trials ended, the results were clear. Humans had won 3 of the 5 challenges. But more importantly, they had changed how both species viewed each other. High Commander Vextar stood before the assembled leaders of both species. "Humans, you have proven your strength in ways we did not anticipate. You fight not just as individuals, but as something greater. You show mercy to enemies and sacrifice for those weaker than yourselves." Jake stepped forward. "Commander Vextar, we didn't come to your worlds to conquer you. We came because we recognized something familiar, survivors from a harsh world who refused to give up." Mordak had been quiet during the ceremonies, but now he spoke. "Human Morrison, by our laws, we should submit to your authority. You have defeated us in honorable trials." Jake shook his head. "War Chief Mordak, we don't want your submission. We want your alliance. Earth needs friends, not subjects." The proposal shocked both species. Vorthaki had never been offered partnership instead of domination. "You would trust us as allies after we threatened your people?" Torvak asked. Some of humanity's best alliances started with former enemies. Jake said, "We've learned that diversity makes us stronger. Your strength combined with human adaptability could accomplish things neither of us could do alone." 6 months later, a combined human-Vorthaki fleet left the system, not as conquerors returning with spoils, but as explorers setting out to discover what the galaxy had to offer. The Harbinger flew alongside Vorthaki warships, their crews learning from each other. Jake stood on his bridge, watching the stars ahead. Amy was at her station, plotting courses to unexplored systems. In the crew quarters, human and Vorthaki team members shared stories and compared survival techniques. "Captain," Ryan reported from communications, "we're receiving signals from an unknown system. It might be another species." Jake smiled. "Then let's go introduce ourselves properly. Both of our species have learned something about making friends instead of enemies." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, carried with it the hope that cooperation and respect could accomplish more than conquest ever could. Behind them, two homeworlds worked together to build a future neither could have imagined alone.